If I was going to have the best coaches and the best people working with my kids to keep them turned on, I'd have it in those adolescent years, because those are typically the turn on, turn off years. We know in physical education that's when kids decide they hate PE or they love PE. Everybody loves it up through the elementary school years. That's a time when all the skills they learned and practiced in elementary school need to be relearned, because they now have longer levers, muscle fiber differentiation, different aerobic capacity, different center of gravity. This is an entirely different kid. So this is an idea of keeping kids in the game, keeping them in the game, and you won't lose them if you will wait till they go through that. But we really need some talented and gifted instruction and coaching in those middle school years. It's hugely important.
Well, it's interesting, if you leave kids on their own, if you just watch free play situations, which we don't have much anymore, the sandlot's long gone. But what kids would do is come up with rules. If you're the best player, the other team then gets to pick the first two to counteract you. Or you got to hit left-handed. Or actually, when I was going through these quick starts, the pros had to play with the opposite hand. So they'd be more like kids learning, which still wasn't, they're pretty good both hands, but the idea to do that. So you could play up at times, with an older age group, or the whole quick start is you have different balls. I've actually thought the other end of the spectrum, when people are playing 70, 75, 80 division, should we start using some of the smaller courts, smaller equipment? Because we don't like to think of it, but I'm on that now. You hit 50s and it slows down. But the whole idea of adapting. So I think you could do that in the local region. We get questions in juniors. Should I go to California to play a tournament? I live in New England. And I always say, are you beating everybody in New England? No, but I mean, really, if you're beating everybody in New England, then maybe, and there's nobody else left to play, then maybe you need to go out of your section or out of your region.
But is it everybody your age or everybody outside of my age? I mean, if I'm the best 10-year-old player in New England, is it okay if I just start playing against 12, 14 adults to be able to start?
No. We see that in other sports. If anybody follows women's basketball, college women's basketball, usually they're playing college guys, not on the men's team, to give them better competition. So there's ways to do things locally, and it also ties to expense and cost. But I think Bob's point is, prior to puberty, it's a real low success rate predicting athletic talent. There's always a Tiger Woods, who at a young age was a prodigy, and there's some around, but it's a real low probability because puberty is the big wild card.
Okay, one other quick question, and then I want the audience to have an opportunity to answer some questions too. We've never talked about this, but this is kind of my own little pet peeve, is that I just can't understand why tennis would have 10 and others, even 12 and 14s for that matter, play 2 or 3 times more matches per day than the pros. When every other sport, it seems like not even in high school or in college they don't reduce it somehow. Is tennis different than other sports, or does it make sense for us to play that many matches in a day? And is there anything you give us in terms of how much should a kid that's 10 and under play in one day in terms of competition? You understand tennis, you understand the physical demands. They're playing in sometimes some extreme heat, sometimes indoors. I mean, how much is too much as far as playing per day?
Well, I really look at it from a kid's standpoint, because that's how I've been trained. If you know anything about kids up through the age of 10, if you can get a good 30 minutes out of them, you've done a heck of a job. Okay. They fatigue. They go off task. They just can, no way. I always say their attention span is related to their height. And the shorter they are, the shorter the attention span. And so these little folks go off task and they're doing other things. So number one, I think when you use competition with these young kids, it should be in very short bouts. That's one of the things we teach all physical educators. Very, very short bouts, short games. Maybe they last 10 minutes at best. And then you get a new opponent, because that gives you another chance to win. And then we'll go on to another opponent. when you're working with young kids and you're out there and you're giving them the opportunity to compete, and I love to compete. I hardly beat anybody now because I'm knocking on the door of 70, but I still love to compete, and I'll give it a chance, okay? And tennis really wasn't my sport. I was a handball player and played all over the country playing handball, and I love to compete. And so I'm not against competition, and I'm not against these kids. But even going back to the competition thing, I will say this. If you let kids play on their own, they develop their own system of handicapping. I'll give you a head start because they know they can beat them every time, so that's not competition. And they'll handicap themselves. But I would say to have them play 3-4 matches in a day, and they're bored and tired by the end. And one of the things we know is that kids go off task and literally quit when they're tired. I mean, if you've ever worked with 5-, 6-year-olds, you know that if you tell them to do something and they're tired, they just say no. No.
Some adults do that.
I don't
too,
want
once in a
to.
while.
Well, I know, but that's a different story. Yeah, they sure do.
It's a hard question, but I think I'm generally agreeing with Bob. I mean, one of the things that somebody was saying was, you know, we see these kids now with the smaller equipment. Think, look at Sweet. He was pretty excited. He was a coach. You saw him getting excited up here, the kid strokes. But you still need to remember, I don't know what age the kids were, but say 10. They may look like an adult. They may have cool tennis stuff on. They have a sweet stroke because of the ball and the equipment, but it's a 10-year-old. And kids are not miniature adults. Let's just take physiologically. That kid doesn't dissipate heat as well as a male counterpart. They have a smaller skin surface or some other physiological things. So in hot play, you just have to be extra careful with kids. The attention span, we already heard. Physiologically, if we put that kid on a weight program, he would get stronger, but he would not get as strong as he would after puberty. So even though they might look that way, they're not, and they're kids. So I think the general idea, keep it shorter. Other sports also get into trouble. In Michigan, we have kids that play more hockey games than the Detroit Red Wings. And then they wonder why kids may be losing interest. 180 games a year, they get home at 2 in the morning. So I think we got to be sane. The other thing I'd go back with and finish is, it's not just a kid, parent. I did some work for U.S. Swimming about 10 years ago. They were having a lot of kids not entering swimming anymore. If you ever had a kid swim, you go to the swim meet at 8 in the morning, and at 8 at night, you're still waiting for the relays. And they were trying to pass some rules that they could get a swim meet in a 2 or 3 hour span, because then the parents were more likely to have their kids swim. So if we could figure out competitive formats, shorter, so the multiple partners, you get in and you get out. And if we want to get a lot of people playing early, once your kid gets hooked, then as a parent, you end up sort of, you know, we've all done that. You end up getting hooked with them. But at that front end, make it appealing, attractive. So I'd answer that way.
And I'd just close by saying, take a look at golf. The reason that appeals to young kids, if you can bring it down to their level, is because you play a hole at a time. So each time I have a chance to win each hole. And number 2, we have a handicap system. So I have a chance to win every time. No greater motivator than that. Remember, it's not competition if you don't have the opportunity to win.
Let's see if there's some questions from any of the folks out there.
Generally, what you hear from are the parents and the kids that are gifted. And if you can get beyond that and start to bring in some of these other parents who really want their children to have a chance, you'll get a heck of a groundswell. And that will go by the wayside. But remember, most people yell out in self-interest. And the gifted kid and the parents of the gifted kid are really speaking out in self-interest. They want their kid to keep winning and beating up everybody else and getting the opportunity to travel all over and do these things. And of course they're going to holler at first because it's going to look like it's almost equal opportunity for everybody, and that's a hell of a negative concept, isn't it? There's a million places to go if you're good. Everybody wants you. They'll recruit you. They'll pay for you. They'll cheat. They'll do everything they can. to get you. So, you know, let's get off that bandwagon. We'll take care of those kids who are gifted. That's the easiest thing in the world to do. What we're not doing is bringing these masses and giving them time to develop and get to the point where they have a chance to compete and be successful. And rankings are just one way to turn off the masses. Why would you want to participate in something where you're at the bottom of the barrel all the time and we document it? Let's put it in paper.
Oh, completely. Oh, absolutely support the orange ball as well. We would like to keep the green ball in play so that we have the opportunity for those kids to have that experience of, if they are the elite, the very few elite, that we have the opportunity to get them on a full-size court with the green ball. I think we have to be the leaders. It would be my answer as being, you know, we want to see the kids develop in the best way possible. And do parents make the rules when it comes to other sports? I think it's up to us, to everyone in this room and those of us in the tennis world, to make the rules and to say that we've listened to everyone and that we think this is what's best. And to basically say to parents, no, your kid's not ready to do that.
I taught college students for 35 years at Arizona State, and if we always lowered the baskets for young kids so they could be successful playing basketball. But where do you think, every time we went to an elementary school, where do you think my college kids wanted to play? On the 10-foot baskets or the 8-foot baskets? The 8-foot baskets so they could dunk it. You can go back and forth. You can do all these kinds of things. Everybody likes the enjoyment. But I think it's a great answer when you said leadership. No one ever said that coaching is not about teaching people how to be better human beings. And as a coach, your job is to teach young kids at that age how to be good human beings. And it's not about elitism that we're going to teach you in our sport. It's about that all people count. We want you all involved. And yes, we know some of you will go on to be great because your mom and dad gave you the genetic material to be great, because that's the greatest key of all. And so the real issue here is leadership. As a coach, when parent says something, you talk to them. And there's a possibility they don't like it, they'll go someplace else. But you'll only pay that price early on. Over time, that will smooth out. We've seen it smooth out. We work with 40,000 kids in tennis every day in Mesa, Arizona. One of the first things I do is to teach people how to manage kids. And one of the biggest things is to group kids quickly on signal. Means I want groups of 3. And that you take a different group of kids or a different partner every time, so that you learn that all of us are worth having as partners. Now when you're out playing, I can stop the match immediately, say, find a new partner, go at it. And they start to learn that they pick. By choosing different people all the time, you learn to play against everybody. So sometimes you're going to be at the right level, sometimes you're going to be with somebody who's better. That's real life. And so kids learn that we all are part of this situation. I don't think you need to group them by ability in the 10 and unders.
You guys are really well organized and you market great and you got great materials. Will it be implemented at planned at the farthest level that you get out of the national office? So I think section directors, tennis directors, sometimes in kids' sports, it's like, well, it's just kids, it's hit and giggle. You got to be holding those people accountable. No, you didn't. Why wasn't the full range of balls out there today? Why didn't you rotate kids around so they could experience? So I think the fidelity, when we look at interventions in schools or why, when PE fails, why? Some old coach rolls the ball out and doesn't really care versus a physical educator who goes out and implements it. So I think part of this leadership is the same accountability we hold people at the US Open to, we need to hold entry people to in terms of implementing the program correctly, following the plan. I'm a section person. I go out and I'm checking. I'll tell you, I'll give you a quick story. I went into Walmart because one of my staff was teaching her kids tennis with big equipment, so I was looking for Quick Start. And I couldn't find it all. I found the rackets, but they didn't have any of the balls. So, you know, how is that implemented like planned? How do we make all that work so it's one stop and you can get it? Because if I'm a regular parent, that's it. I either aren't going to buy the racket or I'm going to use the wrong balls.
We have a chance to be the best youth sports organization there is if we do one thing, and that is filter all of our decisions through, is it good for kids and is it good for the masses of kids, number one. Number two, is it good for tennis? Number three, is it good for USTA tennis? There is not a sport organization out there that doesn't think they do that all the time, but they don't. And these guys will tell you all about that as well. We've got to make sure that our decisions are based on what's good for kids, and we will have the best sports organization. So I thank you guys for coming today.
Thank you.
Hold on a second. Wait a second.
Yeah, we've learned quite a bit about what motivates kids to take part in sport. First, they have multiple reasons or motives for doing it. I mean, most kids will tell you fun. And what's fun? Well, fun is probably being with your friends. Fun is moving and being active. Fun is improving your skills. Fun is liking the coach you're playing for. So kids have multiple reasons. And sometimes they mention winning, but it's usually part of a number of reasons. Yeah, sports specialization is a really hot topic today across the whole landscape of youth sports. There's a big concern that we're specializing too early in the process. So you're 6 and your dad says you're going to earn a college scholarship in tennis, so he takes you out there every day, or your mom says you're going to be a great soccer player or whatever. And yet the research tends to show us most great athletes in this under 10 played multiple sports. And the reasons for that is, if I play soccer, it may help my footwork. If I play baseball, it may help my throwing motion, which could help my serve. So having this base, it also gives kids diversity. Throughout the year, they get to play different things. They don't get overuse injuries. So a couple of reasons: multiple motor skill development. We also know they need to sports sample, try different sports. And it also kind of breaks the boredom up. Now, there's a time to specialize. We're not saying they wouldn't specialize. The problem is that's getting lower and lower, and it's an inappropriate time. So they need to specialize when they're ready and their body's for that. And that's probably when they're 14, 15, 16. And at that age, it may not even mean that they're playing just one sport. They may drop down from 3 to 2. I always think of Andy Roddick, who I think played high school basketball all through high school, as well as tennis. I think tennis sometimes falls prey to the myth that you have to travel all over Kingdom Come, you have to have early championships, you need to do all these things to develop talent. And yet there's other sports that don't do that. Football, for example, at the younger levels doesn't have like a national championship system. And there's a lot of avenues to get good. The key is for youngsters to develop their skills to play other kids of equal ability. Now, you could do that at the local level. If I'm 8 and I can beat all the 8-year-olds, maybe I start playing with the 9-year-olds. If I'm a girl, and at the younger age, the girls may actually have the advantages, but anytime I may play opposite gender. So I think we can do some things at the local level to mix and match. I may play an older kid. The key is to develop those skills. Now, there is a time to travel, and there is a time for championships. I always tell people, if you're not winning everything in your local region consistently, and then maybe playing up a little and winning, you probably don't need to go from New York to California or to Florida to play tournaments consistently. You do that from a talent development perspective when there's nobody else that can challenge you. And a lot of tournament play, I think, is driven by sort of status and, oh, I played in California, well, you must be really good if I live in Florida, and not necessarily by the need to develop a talent pool. In terms of developing athletic talent, research shows that it takes about 10,000 hours or 10 years of what they call deliberate practice. Now some other people have talked about deliberate play to develop expertise in tennis or any other field for that matter. So people have taken that, says, well, I better start at 5. So I'm going to have 1,500 hours and then by 14 we'll peak out. Well, that's been really misinterpreted. While you need those hours of practice and hours of deliberate play, they're not all, 1,000 a year. You do what's appropriate. At the young age, it may be a base of playing a lot of different sports, developing motor skills. Then as you progress up, if you're 17, you might be practicing 5 hours a day in appropriate conditions. So I think one of the things people have misinterpreted is that you have to have all this practice right away. Secondly, anybody that I know of, when we've studied Olympic champions, elite champions, to do the 10,000 hours of practice, you better fall in love with it at the front end. Because in any sport, you have to do some things at the upper levels that aren't fun. And if you don't fall in love and develop the passion, you're never going to get there. So a big part of the 10 and under tennis is how do we help kids have a situation where they can experience success, learn good basic strokes and movement skills, but really a big one is develop a passion, a love of the game. So one, if they're not talented enough, they'll get as far as they can and then be a tennis fan and play as a part of a healthy lifestyle for their life. And if they're lucky enough to be talented enough and stay injury-free, they're going to end up in the US Open helping make our country proud.